and what that results in for some benefits. So, you know, you look at what you're faced with. As your equipment gets older, repair costs continue to increase. They never really go down. And there is a useful life cycle to everything that's used, whether it's in the wastewater treatment plant or certainly in any of your buildings. You know, a lot of times it falls into that category of deferred maintenance. Well, let's kind of keep it together with baling wire and duct tape, so to speak, right? And we'll get to it later because we don't really have the funds. Again, that's what the legislation is designed to do. We're going to guarantee the savings that are going to come from this project that will fund this project. So that's the idea. Let's take care of those items now rather than keep them on the to-do list. And let's get you up to date and know that you've got a guaranteed source of funds to be able to pay for them. That's the idea here. There's a better way to do some of this stuff in terms of utilizing and leveraging technology, right? How many cell phones are all of us packing right now, right? And I'm not advocating we use cell phones to control, but that's a feature of some of these technologies. It makes us more efficient. It extends the operations staff time and effort. Rather than having to run around all the time and, so to speak, put out fires, they can leverage technology to take care of some of these issues and be proactive rather than reactive. You know, benefits, when you think about what is this going to do, I'll talk some more about some of that as we go on, but the idea is to permanently reduce some of these budget costs from not having to continually repair some of this older equipment and to continually pay increasing electric costs, for example. We'll guarantee what those savings are that are going to come from that. Another basic philosophy of what the state outlined when they put this legislation together also is to shift risk. So can the city do some of this work? Yeah, absolutely. You guys have more than qualified men within the city that are capable of doing this. But it's really always a matter of budget and time, right? When are you going to get to it and how are you going to pay for it? So I'm not saying we do it better than the guys at the city. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that this is an opportunity to know that A, you've got the funding to do it, and the fact that that funding is guaranteed, you're shifting that risk, that responsibility, that liability to a third party to ensure that it gets done on a contractual basis. And as Robert alluded to also in his opening comments, it's not a matter of us just coming in and doing a bunch of work, collect a check, and then we go back to Phoenix. That's not it at all. Again, a provision of the state legislation says we must continually prove that these savings are actually taking place, that the warranty is continually being covered, a number of those follow-up items. So, unfortunately for Dwayne, if you guys hire us, he's stuck with me. You're not going to get rid of me that easy. But no, in all seriousness, we have a long-term vested interest in wanting to maintain our working relationship with the city to guarantee and to provide for the long-term life cycle of this equipment in as efficient manner as possible. Mayor, you look like you had a question. No? Okay. You just pondering, huh? Okay, not yet. All right, very good. All right. So again, I won't discuss everything. Those are just a couple of pictures of some things that we found at the wastewater treatment plant that we think that can have some benefits in terms of some upgrades. So again, this is not a complete detailed list. That's to come should we, again, decide to move to the next step together. But there's definitely some things to do, for example, at the wastewater treatment plant in terms of some higher efficiency motors, some fine bubble diffusers, which are a much more efficient way of doing some things. I listed Pace Engineering. Robert and again, Dwayne have been very helpful in providing some information that has been already done by a consultant through Pace Engineering, where they've made a number of recommendations that have to do with things that am I stating it correctly when I say maybe should have been done from the get-go in that plant? Is that basically right? Okay. So in other words, in order to take that plant now from its, middle age and extend that life and make it prepared for potential future growth, things of that nature, there's some things they're recommending. And we would intend to work again together with them and with Dwayne's approval and his guys, that those were good ideas to go ahead and implement and use as part of a project like this. You've already done some cool solar stuff out there. That solar field is already producing basically what you need. Should you decide to expand the capacity of that plant, it might make sense to add some solar again to take that demand off of there. So that's something we'll look at in terms of long-term plan with the plant, what have you. So let's talk about the street lights for a minute. Many municipalities in the state of Arizona are in the process of upgrading their typical high-pressure sodium lights, those kind of yellowish lights that spray light in all directions, to the new LEDs. I'm sure you're all familiar with the LEDs. It's a somewhat brighter light, it's a whiter light, it's a cleaner light, and it's a much more efficient light also. Minimum, it's about a 30% savings off your utility bill by converting from the existing technology to the LEDs. And as part of a project like that, what we always find, and what Robert and myself and Dwayne have already talked about, is there are some areas that may not be as well lit as they need to be. They may be overlit in some areas. And there may be some lights that are actually shining into a business or a residence. So those are all considerations that we would look at as part of a potential upgrade project. And what you'll find with these lamps, for example, the lamps that we're using, down in the city of Yuma, are what's called a full cutoff. So imagine, if you will, a street lamp that kind of hangs out over the street like this. A full cutoff basically just means it has a shield that comes down on both sides of waves, which means that any light that comes out of there is directed where it's needed, right? Down onto the sidewalk, down onto the street. So we'll ensure that those are the correct lumens. And a side benefit of that speaks to another thing that I read in your sustainability plan, which is very important in many communities, which is the whole Dark Skies initiative, right? There's a reason you guys live down here, or one of the reasons that you live here is because when you walk out at night, you can see the stars. And we don't want the streetlights to interfere with that, which some of your streetlights are currently doing that. So we can ensure that, in fact, with these new LED lights, that it will lessen that amount of light pollution that's going up. It'll go down, and you'll be able to see the sky a little bit better. So it's not a benefit that I can specifically quantify, but I can tell you based on our experience that, in fact, that is absolutely what happens.
It's just a comment. We do have certain codes in place in our city code having to do with dark skies, so that would be important to us.
Okay, good. Well, then we'll make sure that, again, should you decide to move forward with us, that we'll make that part of what our engineers take a look at and make sure that any lamps that we recommend meet that criteria for you. Okay, good. I'm glad you told me that. So, the last thing in terms of potential improvement measures, there's plenty of stuff to do in some of your buildings. Again, it falls in that category of deferred maintenance, and I don't say that as a criticism, I say that as a fact of life. I can go to any city in Arizona, and there's deferred maintenance for so many of the day-to-day things, whether it's lighting, or the air conditioning equipment, or the building automation controls, all of those kinds of things. So there's a lot of benefits to upgrading your buildings beyond just the cost savings. There's a better working environment for the employees. It makes your guys on staff more efficient. Like I said before, they're not running around putting out fires. They're leveraging technology. They'll be able to see exactly what's already going on. So a lot of different things there. Is there any questions in specific regarding just sort of the preliminary analysis items that we brought up?
Do you have an idea of what we're spending on, maybe Gary does, on street lighting presently?
Yes, we do, and that number didn't seem to stick in my head, so I can't throw it out to you. I'd have to go back into our notes. But yeah, that was part of.
I think it's quite substantial.
It is, yeah. I mean, usually what we find with cities is that wastewater treatment plants typically consume the most amount of power, and then depending upon how many buildings that a city has, that may be number 2, it may be number 3, depending on, again, how many streetlights they have. So it's a significant expenditure, but that was a lot of the information that Dwayne was very helpful in gathering for us, so we at least made our preliminary analysis from that.
It's like 5,000 a month.
5,000 a month.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
If it's okay, council, I'd like to jump in with a couple of details. We're pretty certain at some point we need to deal with the swamp coolers at the library. There's a bit of a humidity problem. They're not reliable. They don't create an environment in which the public can really use the library upstairs well. And we're now in the library on Saturdays. And you know, we have more people using the library, wanting to get in there, and we have a bad environment. Well, that's a project we already know that we need to launch and do. It makes sense to do it this way and create the savings and have that offset the cost of the project. The same thing can be said for the improvements at the wastewater treatment plant. We already know that we're wasting energy there. We already know that the equipment that we have is not what was originally envisioned for the plant, and that we can do better in terms of quality of operation and consistency. So we already know at some point we're going to have to deal with the lift station motors. And it doesn't make sense to just go out and do it when we can do it this way, and we can document the savings and have the savings offset the cost of the construction. So, you know, from my perspective of looking at our physical plant and understanding the things that we need to get done, it makes sense to package work and have a guaranteed company guaranteeing us that we will save to pay for that. And that if something wacky happens and we are not saving that much electricity, they write the check for the difference we don't. And I think it makes sense to try and do these things with Siemens, but there's an awful lot of education and some suspicion out there based on what the county went through that I think that, you know, we've got to work through so that people understand what we're trying to accomplish.
Just to highlight one thing that Robert just touched on in terms of knowing what the savings are and what you can expect and what have you. One of the ways that we work with our customers to give you a better level of comfort so that you understand that this is exactly what is really happening is that some of the technology that we would intend to implement, we will make sure that, again, Dwayne and his staff have access to that and have training on it. And it's the same technology that we will use either on a hands-on basis or on a remote basis to continually measure and verify what those savings look like. So in other words, you know, Dwayne may look at it on a weekly basis, right? And on Friday morning when he's looking through some of his reports and some of his graphs, he may notice an anomaly, like, I don't know, there's some additional electricity being used outside of the norm at the library. So that's a perfect opportunity for him to either dig in and find out what's going on or enlist our help and get a hold of our technicians or some of our engineers and say, hey, this is what's happening, what should I be looking for? The point is that A, the city will have access to the same technology that we're going to utilize to measure and verify, and secondly, it will take place on a real-time basis. In other words, it won't happen at the end of a quarter, or God forbid, at the end of a year, where we pull a bunch of utility data and we go, oh, look at that, geez, we missed it. Well, what happened there? Let's go back and look. No. The time to catch it is when things are already happening. And I'm not saying that it will, but we always find things that get out of calibration. Stupid stuff happens. You know, you get an outside air damper that gets stuck open in the middle of July, and it's pulling in 90-degree air into the library for 4 hours in an afternoon. Well, we wouldn't know that till next month when the utility bill came. But if he's looking at it and we're looking at it regularly, we can catch that like this week and go fix it now, so we keep those energy savings in your pocket. So that's one of the ways that we ensure that those kinds of things happen. Again, sorry, I didn't mean to dive into much engineering, but I thought it was germane to the point that you brought it up, so. Okay? All right. Those handouts that Robert just put in front of you are from a wastewater treatment plant project that we finished 6 years ago in Texas, actually. One of my counterparts over here is very proficient at doing wastewater treatment plants. And those are selected pages out of our annual report that we are required to provide to the city. I didn't print the whole thing because, number one, it's a little bit voluminous, and number two, it's a lot of mind-numbing engineering calculations. But the basics of those charts and graphs there is to show you that, in fact, we've achieved some of those savings, and they haven't been little dollars, right? It's been a significant amount of savings. And so that's part of the output that you could expect, again, should you decide to engage with us going forward, that we'll produce that information. It'll be online through the technology that I mentioned a minute ago, but that will produce, whether you want it on a quarterly or an annual basis, and it will go through building by building, measure by measure. In other words, how much did that automation system save, and how much did the lighting save, and how much did the motors save at the wastewater treatment plant? Because we have to budget each one of those line items individually, and we have to calculate and engineer each one of those solutions. So that's why I said before, we do open book pricing, so you know exactly what each one of those measures will result in. You guys are probably bored of hearing the same thing second time, huh?
I think that a few would argue that we could, do with more conservation and upgrade. I guess the questions that are in my mind is, the way I understand this would work, we would, if we engage you, we would give you a lump sum to do this study, and then you're going to develop an estimate for work that needs to be done. So there would have to be a certain amount of work for this to be done for us to get the savings to pay for that work. Just theoretically, that's how this would work. That we would recoup enough savings that would pay for the money that we're going to spend to redo these things.
That's exactly right.
So I suppose, will there be a range? I suppose it would be a range of things that you're going to offer or suggest that we do. So there'll be a range in this estimate that you do. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, one of my upcoming slides speaks to exactly what you're looking for. I've got some specific numbers within a range based upon our initial analysis. Yep, absolutely. Okay. Anything else I'm forgetting that you were thinking of? Okay. Perfect. That's a great lead-in. Glad you asked that question when you did. So, again, based on our preliminary analysis, this is what we believe the range could be for both the savings and what an investment could look like. So, why the range? Well, because, as I mentioned before, this is a co-authored project. So as we dig into each one of these measures and we come back and work through it with the city, we'll do that over the course of a couple of months, where we'll do some study, we'll do some engineering, we'll do some estimating, we'll come back, we'll sit down with you guys, and we'll work through that, and we'll have a whole laundry list, and we'll start to pare that laundry list down, right? We'll say that, hey, measures number 1 through 5, those all look like they meet our objectives, and those are good ideas. Let's include those. But measure 6, 7, we're not sure about 8. 8 maybe requires some more study. Let's look at it this way. But let's exclude 6 and 7. So that's why I give the range. It's kind of the low end and the high end, right, of all the different things that you might anticipate through those 3 different categories of projects that I outlined on the previous slide. Okay? So let me pause here for questions.
Yeah, the potential savings, now would that be, okay, so the idea being here that, that we would be financing this project. And I think does that reflect the 30% savings, or is this savings, this guaranteed savings after you take your cut off the top?
Okay, so three good questions in there. Three good questions. The first is, in terms of the 30% savings, I referenced that as far as the streetlights go. We will not achieve 30% savings on either the wastewater treatment plant or in the buildings. Okay, those numbers are beyond what is typically possible. What is possible in those facilities? Somewhere, probably anywhere from about 10% up to about 20% in those particular facilities. So as an aggregate, will it be 30%? No. I mean, depending on what projects we mix in there and what have you, we'll be plus minus 20% savings. It'd be my educated guess based on our experience. Okay, that's number one. Number two, in terms of the financing of the project, I'm actually going to let Robert address that because he's already done some homework and has some really good ideas for council in regards to that. And then number three, you talked about after we take our cut off the top. So that was a good question in regards to two things. Number one, we don't finance the projects, okay? We're contractors and engineers. Our mission in life is to build projects, to install projects, and then to work with those projects for many years to come. That's our mission in life. That's what we do as a company. In terms of lending money and those types of things, that's not our deal. Other people do it way better. So that's the part that Robert had worked on. So
really you can't answer.
I'm sorry?
You really can't answer my third question.
In terms of the financing?
In terms of, because we would have to talk to a financial institution or something, I suppose. So really, I know that the state mandates that the money that we save has to make the payment on the loan.
That's correct.
That seems to be state law. What I'm saying is this $120,000, this would be coming to the city after we made our payment on our loan, and you're saying that you don't know because you're not doing the financial end of this. So, I mean, it seems like a simple enough question.
It is a simple enough question now that you've explained it. Sorry, I answered a question a minute ago that you didn't ask. So let me answer the question you just did ask. So let's say that we determine there are $120,000 annually in savings. So depending upon the loan term and depending upon the interest rate, that $120,000 and some percentage less than that would be used to fund the loan itself. So in other words, the savings is what is used in order to pay for those improvements. And again, we guarantee those savings. Let's say that we, in collaboration with your financier, design a loan package that, say, the payment's $110,000 a year. And we typically would want to do it that way so that there is a cushion and the city will realize some immediate savings during that initial loan period. As far as how long the loan is, as far as what the interest rate is, those types of things. We'll work with some cash flows with, again, your financier to help design whatever the city determines meets their financial appetite. Does that capture what you're thinking?
Yep. Okay. And council, we have the ability to go out to Arizona's open market and look for the best financing that we can secure.
I understand that. But it seems like my question isn't really getting answered here. So, I'll just drop it because I'm not getting an answer to my question. And it's a simple question. And I know all this depends upon financing, and I know that you can go out to the market and talk to people, and we can finance this. My question is, what actual savings is going to come to the city? We're going to do a better job of lights. We're going to save energy. But it seems like the money that we're going to save is going to be going to pay the loan. What I'm saying is, where's the benefit?
And what Siemens is saying is they will engineer the project because they don't want to have to cut us a check. They will engineer the project
Yes.
so that what we save will guarantee offset the loan that we have to go get to make those improvements.
I understand.
And so what they're gonna do is they're gonna guarantee that, and they're gonna say, if you experience expenditures beyond that, they will pay it. So I believe what they're gonna wind up doing is actually engineering it so that they know that our consumption is gonna be lower. And
Yeah,
that what
I
I'm saying-
understand that too, but I'm not getting an answer to the basic question here. The basic question is, you know, we're gonna borrow this money, we're gonna give it to these guys, they're gonna put in new lights, and it's gonna save this much money. But the money we save is gonna go back to pay the loan.
Correct.
What is coming to us?
The new lights.
New lights. Okay, thank you. Finally, somebody answered the question. All I'm getting out of this deal is new lights.
But
So we're really, any savings, any potential savings that we're getting from the new lights is going back to
pay
these
for it.
guys.
But
All right, that was my question, and you answered.
But there's more to it than just the lights, because
Well, I can see that. I saw his presentation. I can see that there's more to it than the lights.
we're
I'm
not,
just, I just want, a little plain spoken answer to my plain spoken question. That's all I was asking for.
well, I'd like to make sure that everyone understands that.
That's what I was trying to do, is make sure everyone understands.
Beyond just getting the lights, we're not having to go out and fix the lights all the time, because they're not going out anymore, because the LEDs last longer.
I understand.
We're-
You don't have to give me I don't need the sales talk. I just, I just needed an answer to my simple question. And my simple question, it seems the mayor was the only one that answered it, and he said, we get new lights, and we get some other efficiencies in a couple of municipal buildings, which we don't have a lot of.
Sure, understand.
And upgrades at the wastewater treatment plant. So what's the value of that?
I'm sorry.
Well, what is the value, in dollars and cents, what is the value of these upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant? What does a motor cost to change out?
Well,
If I can speak to that one. A replacement pump right now costs about $30,000. If one goes out to the sufficiency that we actually have to replace and put a brand new pump in, those lift station pumps are about $20,000 to $30,000. Even a cheaper one's $20,000. Every time we send one of these old pumps out that were installed in the plant to get fixed, it's at least, and you guys have passed it, multiple times, can range between $6,000 and $10,000. The technology that was put in the plant in 2005 isn't the best technology available today, because all of our pumps and our lift stations are either on or off, as opposed to, slowly ramping them up depending on flow, which is what a lot more plants are gone to, so that instead of either on or off, it's a percentage of an actual, a percentage of flow. I'm going to speak to this at the regular session at the end a little bit, but there's a lot of things that we have discovered, and especially after the past couple months, as much time that's been at the plant, there's a lot of things that corners were cut to get the plant built, and we're at the point now that some of these need to be taken care of, or we're going to end up in bigger issues. And this is my understanding of this project, is a way to finance those, so that those efficiencies, instead of pumping on and are off, and a gradual use of the pumper, let's say 25 or 30% of the pump being used, it prolongs the life of the pump, uses less power. Now the diffusers that he mentioned for the wastewater treatment plant is the digesters, where everything we pump out that before we haul it off to the landfill. In 2005, the newest technology were just pumps, just to kind of circulate them. There's something else that will save a lot more money and will help reduce the amount of sludge we have, called fine bubble diffusers, which is basically pumping air into it. I've tried to figure out a way just to hook a compressor onto it, but I can't just do that. Those are some of the other things. There's another a plan or a potential upgrade of putting a disc filter in the plant that will cause us to use the UV lights less, because the less grit that you send through the UV lights, right now we have them full on all the time. That's just the way the plant's built. You have them just crank it on, you walk away, that's it. So there's a lot of these things that I think we can expand on maybe even possibly a different work session. There was a lot of engineering that was already done that the city walked away from, and I personally think that was a bad idea. But I think this might be a way to get some of that paid for.
Thank you.
Yeah, it seems to me what we will get, Bill, is, better infrastructure. And we'll avoid having, run around putting out fires all the time. We'll have a better, lighting in the community that people appreciate, that people don't like streetlights shining in their eyes. So it's not all just monetary savings, it's a quality issue, right?
If I could, the Title 34 program, it was put in to help the cities be able to get new equipment basically without having to raise their budget. Because what this evens out as, that we will be getting new stuff, and it's not going to cost us any more than we're paying right now. Where if we didn't go with this program, and we had to get the new pumps, and we had to decide to LED lights in ourselves, then we would have to pay that on top of our budget. So that's a simplified way of.
Well,
Well, it sounds good. I mean, we're going to get something for nothing. And, we're going to get new infrastructure, we're going to get new lights. I mean, it sounds good. To really say that we're going to save anything by this, we're not going to save anything. We're just going to upgrade our infrastructure. I don't see any.
Yeah, worst case.
Yeah,
worst case scenario.
Costs us money in the future, if we don't do it now.
Right.
I understand that. It's just, just fuzzy language sometimes.
Yeah.
So, in order to make any kind of decision about this, we have to talk to the money man for sure. We have to see what this.
That's what most of my questions are.
Just what this means as far as
And
money goes.
one of the other benefits of this approach, if we were just to decide by ourselves that we wanted to change the pumps in the lift stations because we knew we could save the money, without this kind of engineering analysis, without ongoing information coming back from someone that's a third party to verify that we're making the savings, we would be out on the street trying to borrow money for a project that we couldn't prove that we were going to be actually reducing our consumption to offset the cost. And so the financing folks would look at us and say, well, I think that you might be good for $30,000. With this kind of an approach, we're able to say we're good for the $30,000 because we're going to save $30,000 at least in electrical consumption on this. So we will have the money to pay you back because we're saving this money on the electrical consumption. And it does give us an advantage when we are trying to borrow money to have this kind of analysis and a company by our side helping to propose it to the street.
Yeah, I want to make sure that you have the time necessary to finish your presentation.
Well, and I was actually going to ask for questions, because I only have a couple last thoughts on a couple last slides, but I want to make sure I get to your questions, so whoever had questions, please.
We are kind of running out of time, unfortunately, and I do have some questions. Maybe all of us do.
But as I understand, the money questions don't go to
No.
and so we need process questions and procedure questions. So.
I just wanted to clarify that you clearly indicate the energy savings will offset cost of the project. And you're literally talking about all costs of implementing this project.
That's correct.
In terms of the energy analysis, the plan of work, construction specifications, preparation and marketing of the finance package. Would it include the finance costs?
Yes, that's a requirement under state legislation.
And then either you do actual construction or you contract for construction.
That's correct, both.
In supervision of the project.
We have our own in-house project managers.
How about long-term operation and maintenance?
Well, so that's dependent upon, like, the city, I don't mean to steal the thunder from the next meeting, but in terms of like the wastewater treatment plant, the city's made a decision to hire an outside firm. We actually don't do that, but we certainly are always here for ongoing support and ongoing service on any of the things that we work with the city on.
And you indicated that the life of the project could be 12 to 25 years, so you're making a 12 to 25 year commitment to the community in terms of providing oversight, in terms of monitoring energy savings, making sure that everything is essence, you're providing warranty, in essence, that we, the only other question that I really have, and that is that certainly some of the decisions that we're looking at here, we're also in the process of hiring a new public works director. And I understand that we have 3 candidates, and 2 of which have an engineering degree. My only hesitancy is timing in terms of, are we ready to move right now? I mean, it would be a shame to bring someone in and not have that person consulted in this project. And likewise, I understand that we certainly are interviewing firms to operate our waste treatment plant. And there's been a name of a firm mentioned specifically that we're working with. But that contract likewise has not yet been brought before council, and that has not been confirmed. And certainly it would seem like we're ahead of ourselves if we made some decisions regarding improvement of the waste treatment plant before we actually hired a consultant who's going to manage and direct that. Likewise, we have representatives from Arizona Public Service, and certainly I've heard that they're wanting to get rid of their electric light, street light contracts. That certainly has been a real burden to us over the years in terms of that contract. That would certainly be great, but we haven't negotiated that yet either. I mean, we're being told that it's coming, but that still has not yet been brought before council. And so, in essence, it seems like there's several major decisions here, that actions that we haven't yet gotten to, that we would need to take before we actually entered into a contract. I mean, your proposed agenda or timeline said that we're going to start in September. Well, and so anyway, that's.
So your concerns are valid. Those are all important decisions. Let me reassure you, in terms of the timeline, it's not an instantaneous project that we develop. By the time we actually engage and get started, we're probably 30, maybe 45 days down the road. And the actual project development cycle will be anywhere from about 4 months to maybe as much as 6 months. So that's a fairly good size or fairly lengthy time frame that should allow for these other decisions to be taking place, and in the case of a new public works director, to involve him in a number of those decisions before any final decisions are made.
Because certainly one of the unusual parts of your contract here, a normal request for proposals, is a person brings us, all different firms bring us proposals, and we then evaluate and choose one over the other. In your case, we're making kind of a commitment to you up front, at some point in time, and in which case we are obligated for your analysis, the cost of your analysis, to go into a request for proposal or analysis.
Well, one of the
and that's going to be something that I think got us all, at least me, a little bit hesitant in terms of we're trying to anticipate what the benefits are going to be and how large our project will be, and realize that once we say yes, then we're obligated to you moving forward.
Well, that's partly why we do the preliminary, so at least we all have a basic idea of what this may potentially look like in terms of not only the financials, but also the specific measures. And then there is still a provision in the state legislation that when all is said and done during that 4 to 6 month development process, and we come back with a project that does not meet these criteria, that at that point you are not liable for what our fee is at that point. So you still have that out clause at that point.
I guess one final comment, since we're running out of time, and that is that I think we're all excited about improving our streetlights. And certainly I think particularly interested if you're looking at the dark sky approach to this. I also know, as a 6-year city council, that every proposal for a streetlight has 2 people who feel very strongly it shouldn't be there, and 2 people who feel very strongly that it should be there. And I think that certainly the political process of dealing with streetlights, as much as we all agree is one of our highest priorities, is not going to be, I don't think it's going to be an easy process. I mean, it's going to be an involved process, I guess, in somebody's time. I don't know what that means. Public Works works director, city manager, or you in terms of, as we go through and start assessing placement of streetlights. And of course, we're now looking at what we now have and whether they're efficiently placed. And we're also going to be looking at additional locations. And I do know that that's not going to be an easy political decision. It's going to be a timely decision, I should say, or it takes time to do in terms of the political activity deciding that.
Well, Council, if I might, I did want, and I hear the concerns about where's this going? And because the scope's not written yet, you don't know. But what I can say is, this is not something that council says, yeah, I think this is a good idea, let's do it, and then all of a sudden it has spiraled out of control 8 months later, and you're doing things that you never intended to have done. This is not you guys issuing an okay to move ahead, and then we just go do whatever we want. This is a continuing dialogue with the council. There's continuing evaluation of what we're putting together as a project. I get it. The worst fear would be that you have good intentions for improving something, and then all of a sudden what you wind up with is ridiculous. And that's not what Siemens proposes. And that's the reason why other communities like them. It's the reason why they've done a good job here in the state. They've been very careful to coordinate with local staff and councils to ensure the intention of the project is still true.
Other questions while we got a minute or two left?
My biggest concern is we're going to get to the end of when the project has to begin, and within 30 days of getting the agreement of what we're going to do, that we don't have the funding. And that's the reason I want to hear more about how we're going to do this.
We'll discuss the funding at a separate meeting.
Okay. Well,
Like I indicated, we're discussing process and procedure, but we'll discuss funding separately.
yeah, you said that the funding was from the city manager, but not that it was going to be in the meeting, so, sorry.
Ms. Hunt.
I've got one, but it has to do with funding, but still, can somebody fully explain the very last paragraph of the information that we got regarding the $58,000?
Well, as I understand it, the fee to proceed is $58,000. And that if we then were to look at that and say, you know what, we don't like any of this, we don't want to do it, then we would owe $58,000. If we were to say, this is a great idea, let's go ahead, then that $58,000 is wrapped into the entire project with a guarantee that it won't, that we will have a savings.
That's exactly right.
But where will that come from if
That's inclusive of the project.
we decide not to do the project? Where is that going to come from?
You're asking
That's
which account that would come from?
Yes.
Okay, we can discuss the finance at a different time because I don't have that answer this time.
But the city manager should.
Well, and this isn't a meeting, we're out of time, is the unfortunate thing, so this is going to have to be carried over.
So we'll have another work session.
We will, and we will be specifically discussing that. Is that all right, staff? Mr. Smith?
Yes, sir.
Thanks for your interest, Council. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Look forward to
sir.
working together.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah, you bet. I appreciate your interest. Thank you very much.
We have a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Those in favor, signify by stating aye. Opposed, same sign. Stand adjourned. We, now we're ready to start the next meeting.